thrilled to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Emily Silverman. Dr. Silverman is an academic hospitalist at the Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital and the host and creator of The Nocturnists, a live storytelling event and podcast for physicians and other healthcare workers. I first heard of Dr. Silverman in the summer after my first year of medical school, in 2016, when I read about the sold-out storytelling event she had debuted in San Francisco, where healthcare professionals got up on stage and told stories about their jobs. Buried in my preclinical books on the East Coast, I was particularly captivated by the idea that storytelling was a powerful medium to achieve human connection in medicine, and inspired that a resident was capable of making this happen. I reached out to her to interview her for a profile on Doctors Who Create, and spoke with her on the phone while sitting in a closet, the only quiet place I could find. What struck me then about Dr. Silverman, and continues to inspire me, was her sense of curiosity, empathy, and brilliance with words, which combined to allow her to curate incredible stories for the Nocturnists events and podcasts. Season 2 of the podcast has just been released, and I can assure you that the stories and her interviews with the storytellers will make you laugh, cry, and ponder the universe all in the span of 25 minutes on your walk to work. You should subscribe now if you haven't already. While Dr. Silverman is busy working as a physician, podcast host, event organizer, and coach for other people's stories, I'm thrilled that she has traveled all the way from San Francisco to share her story. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Emily Silverman.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Vika, for those kind words. And I'm just so impressed by everything that you've been able to put together and to see all these faces here. And also, I have to say, very impressed with your painting and drawing skills, even as an 8th grader. I feel like that would probably be somewhere in a museum, so thank you for sharing that as well. So, Doctors Who Create, you all are Doctors Who Create. Raise your hand if you are a doctor. Excellent. And then how about medical students? Great. And then anybody not a doctor or a medical student but still work in the health professions? Excellent. And then anybody who doesn't work in the health professions per se but is still here? Excellent. And just before I launch in, I'd love to learn a little bit about who is in the room. So does anyone just want to raise their hand and tell me what is their creative passion or what brought them here? Yes, go ahead. Wow. Okay. So I don't know if you all heard that, but that's making art from X-rays from a radiologist. I know we've got a lot of people here doing wonderful, weird things. I want to hear about it. Go ahead.
I'm a child neurologist and I write poetry, and I published one book and I haven't written for a while, so I saw this and I signed up because I was looking for inspiration. So I want to thank everybody here for participating in this event.
Wonderful. We have an author, poet, child neurologist in the room. Yes?
I'm a neurologist, neurologist, and I paint watercolors, and I actually started as an art student. Lost it, we got it back. So I'm very happy to see this. And I picked up a garden, and we started a graphic medicine course 3 years ago for our students. It's so much fun. It's fun to find.
Wonderful. We have another neurologist who's a painter, watercolor, medical education, graphic medicine curriculum developer. So we have so much talent here in the audience, and I'm so pleased to be here. And normally when I give these kinds of big talks, it's really to convince the audience that creativity and storytelling are a huge part of medicine. But as Vidya said, I'm not going to talk about that today because I feel like we're a self-selecting audience, and I think we all inherently understand the value of creativity in medicine, whether it's bringing that sense of creativity and empathy to the doctor-patient relationship, whether it's using our creativity and our passions as a tool for reflection or for healing or for creating wellness in this environment of, unfortunately, burnout and depression that is so pervasive. Or using creativity to develop new, exciting, innovative projects to help change this big, dysfunctional institution that is the American healthcare system. So I think we all kind of are on the same page about that piece, and I know everyone here in the room has the ability to create those changes, as Vicky said. So what I can offer instead today is the story of how I came to be doing what I'm doing, which is running a medical storytelling live show and podcast called the Nocturnists, and then hopefully at the end share some lessons that I've learned along the way, in case that's helpful for you. So this is little me. People come to medicine from all sorts of different paths. Vidya did a post-bac and decided it sounded like later in life that she wanted to come to medicine. I actually was one of those people who just always wanted to be a doctor ever since I was a little kid, which is a bit strange because neither of my parents were doctors, nobody in my family was a doctor. I was just like obsessed with my pediatrician who was a woman, which I felt like was really inspiring for me. And just had this really deep curiosity about the physical object of my body and wanting to know what I was. And loved science, especially biology, and I just ate all of that up. But I also really loved the arts. My parents were really into the arts, and they took me to museums and the theater, and I loved to draw and to paint and photography and reading and writing and all of those wonderful things. And by the time I got to college, I actually, even though I knew I wanted to be a doctor, made the decision to major in history of art and architecture. And did all of my pre-med stuff in tandem. And I think even in college, I was already starting to feel the angst of, are these two parts of myself able to be mixed, or do I have to keep them separate? And I actually almost abandoned the idea of medicine altogether and took an internship at an art gallery in New York City for a summer, which was a really wonderful experience, but I think quickly made me realize that I did indeed want to go ahead and pursue the path of medicine. So I kind of came back to that plan, and when I applied to medical school, I actually wrote about this in my medical school application essay, which I fished out of my laptop, believe it or not, yesterday. And I reread it, and as you might expect, it's pretty cheesy and the writing is questionable, but I actually have an excerpt here that I'm going to read aloud to you now. Thus, in the years that followed, I managed to unify what used to seem like two distinct academic personalities. I started to see physics not as a series of equations, but as a world of speeding trains and launching elevators. Organic chemistry problems became bizarre Rubik's Cubes, ones that could be solved elegantly by chopping off bromines and popping on ketones in just the right amount. I have no idea what this means. In just the right amount of steps to reach the synthetic product. As a sophomore, I wrote a lyric essay about my thoughts on disease. As a senior, I created a short film about the force of gravity. The diversity of my interests used to feel like a burden, but now it is the hallmark of my college career. My passions, which once felt so disparate, now feel compatible, even inextricable. With this perspective, I will thrive as a student of the science and art of medicine. I joke about it, but I think even in college, I understood what he was talking about, which is that these two things, they're not different. They're all one thing. And that's what I was trying to articulate on the page, and I'm not sure if it was convincing. And to be honest, I'm not even sure how much I believed it as I was writing it. I think in a way I was writing it to convince myself. But luckily, a medical school admissions committee did find it convincing, and I ended up at Johns Hopkins in 2010. And when I got to medical school, my creative activities really fell more into the realm of hobbies. So I was very busy as a medical student, but I did spend some time writing poetry and writing little essays. I got a camera and I started experimenting with it. And actually, it's with that camera that in medical school, I created what I truly feel is one of my greatest creative accomplishments to date, which is the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine 2017 Match Day video. Do you guys watch these videos?
Yes.
Like these second look videos and these match day videos? I feel like this is a super interesting like subculture of medical education and medical training. Thank you, video. Where I just like I want to watch all of them and like analyze them and really like I want to do like a PhD dissertation on these creative medical school videos because I feel like this is like the last hurrah for some medical students for exercising their creativity. But this video, it really is a work of art. It's very well edited, if I do say so myself. And my medical school classmates were excellent actors. And this is the kind of stuff I did, which was really fun and really great. But the truth is, I think I really would have liked to do more in medical school. And everybody knows in medical school there's this summer between the first year and the second year where you're supposed to do a project. And despite making these funny videos and writing poetry and essays, and despite everything that I wrote in my medical school application essay, I decided that summer that I would work in a basic science laboratory. I think I just have to not touch that. I'm just going to stand over here, take it out of the equation. The summer between my first and second year of medical school, I decided to work in a basic science laboratory, dissecting the eyeballs of chicken embryos. And that was a disaster. It was a really wonderful lab, and they were doing great work, but I was bored by it, and I was bad at it. Very, very bad at it. The worst was the day where I accidentally left a little bottle of RNA out on the counter overnight, which, I don't know, has anyone worked in a basic science lab? Oh my god, like everyone! So you've probably been through a similar journey to me, but yeah, this little eyedropper size bottle of an RNA probe that they had meticulously synthesized in the lab that I left out on the counter overnight, and the next morning I came in and I saw it and I realized that it had spoiled and that it probably cost about $5,000. Completely horrifying, like one of those things that you have nightmares about. But fortunately, my PI in the lab was this very gracious and very religious Argentinian woman who benevolently took pity on me and didn't make a big deal about it. She also tried to convert me to Christianity, but that's a story for you. So I really had no business being in the laboratory, is what it came down to. And I think even in medical school, I was pretty lost and was still doing what I thought I was supposed to do. I was following the script of what I thought a medical student was supposed to be doing, and naturally, that didn't really get me anywhere professionally. And then I landed as an intern in internal medicine at UCSF. Who knows what this picture is of? Yeah. So, I put this picture here because I felt like intern year for me was a bit of a black hole. Intern year, I feel like I was spending most of my time just like actively trying not to kill other human beings. I wasn't doing a very good job of feeding myself or exercising or even like bathing on a regular basis, much less self-actualizing or exercising my creative mind. And it was an incredible year where I learned so much clinically, but I did come out of that year feeling pretty disconnected from my creative self and disconnected from my human self. And I think you'll understand what I mean when I say the two of those are deeply connected. So, I came out of intern year, and as an R2, there's a little bit more time and space to breathe and to do things. And at that point, I decided I wanted to do something creative. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I knew I had to do something or else I wasn't going to survive residency. So I started off actually writing prose poems and posting them on a blog, and that was really fun. And my friends would comment and things like that. But I realized that I wanted to give my colleagues the opportunity to share and express themselves the way that I was doing. And so I thought, maybe I'll invite people to submit writing and I'll post them as guest pieces on my blog. But then I thought, there's already all these literary journals in medicine, like this is just going to be more of the same. What is this going to look like? And then a friend of mine invited me to a live taping of The Moth in San Francisco. And I just sat there in the audience as these random people got up and told stories. Some of them were pretty bad, some of them were really good. Some of them were sad, some of them were funny. One guy got up there with his dog, and it was really weird. But I loved that, and I came out of that show thinking to myself, this is what we should be doing in medicine. I think I just was really drawn to the magic of being all together in a room and the community building aspect of that. Among other things, just the spoken word is a really different art than the written word. So the next thing I knew, I was sending cold emails to event spaces in San Francisco, and on my days off, I would get in my car and drive to these event spaces and take a tour and introduce myself and say, I'm a doctor, I'm here for a tour, as if I knew what I was doing. And I didn't know what I was doing, but that's what I did. And I landed on this space. This is called the Embassy in San Francisco. It's a small space, and I think they charged me like $90 to rent it for an evening. And I convinced 8 people, most of them residents, but a couple of them faculty, to stand up and speak. And I think including the faculty was really important, because I think this easily could have fallen into the mold of something that was just for residents, but I think having the faculty involved early on really provided this sort of flattening of the hierarchy and inclusiveness, where you could be sitting in the audience next to your boss or next to your student, or on the stage hearing your student speak or hearing your boss speak. And there was something about that that I found really beautiful. So about 40 people in the audience, and there was no coaching, there was no nothing, nobody knew what was going to happen. And it was really messy, but it was magical. And there was this electricity in the room as people spoke, and then I think people in the audience realized that, wow, a lot of the things that I've been feeling and going through, other people are feeling and going through too. And that makes me feel less alone. And that was really encouraging for me to hear as I got positive feedback from the event. Soon we had scaled up and moved into this 80-seat theater in San Francisco called the Shelton Theater. And I think we did 3 different shows there. And it was in this period where we were fortunate enough to get a write-up in the San Francisco Chronicle. And that really snowballed everything. I started getting emails from people in Berkeley, in Oakland, in Marin, down at Stanford. It was funny, the electronic version of the article came out on a Thursday, and I got all these emails, and then the paper version came out on a Friday, and then on the Friday I got the emails from the mid-career professional, older crowd, and I could tell who was reading online and who was reading on paper. But I got emails from 80-year-old man. I'm a physician and my family is sick of hearing my stories. I need a venue. And these shows just started selling out, really without much in the way of advertising. It was pretty much word of mouth, to the point where we started doing 2-night shows because we were filling this theater, and it got to the point where we decided we really just need to get a bigger space. Fast forward to last month. When, this is our 3rd time selling out the Bravo Theater in San Francisco, which has 360 seats. So that's been a really incredible trajectory of growth for us, and something that we're really proud of. Along the way, we've changed the entire way that we plan the events. So every storyteller is paired with a coach, and for the weeks leading up to the show, the coach and the storyteller work one-on-one to really refine and develop the story. And I always joke that the story development process is half story development and half therapy. Because sometimes, and maybe you all have noticed this, you're not even sure what you're saying until you're halfway done saying it. Writing as an act of thinking, or writing as a way to sort out and locate yourself in the chaos of the work that you're doing. And so part of our job is to help our storytellers figure out what they're trying to say, which is a creative endeavor, but also, I think, an important piece of personal work. And then in addition to the live shows, we now have this podcast, which is wonderful because now anybody in the world really has access to these stories. It sounds easy, right? It's not. It's really hard. And I think the hunger in the medical community for this type of content is obvious. And that made it easy to sell out the theaters and bring in the audience. But there were a lot of challenges along the way that I'd like to share with you. So as I said, early on when I was in my car driving around to these theaters, pretending that I knew what I was doing, I really didn't, and I arguably still don't. I'm very much figuring things out as I go. And when you're putting together something like this, things go wrong. For example, sometimes we pick a theme and put out a call for submissions, and we don't get enough submissions. And we have to scramble to reach out to individuals to get more submissions for the theme, and that can be really stressful. Sometimes there are embarrassing technical difficulties that happen at live shows. Like the night at the Shelton Theater, the microphones just weren't working, and the audience couldn't hear a handful of the stories until intermission, when we were able to get someone to go in and fix it. And I was sitting backstage, just kind of in a catatonic state, not really sure what to do or how to deal with it. And fortunately had a couple people on my team who were able to spring into action and problem solve while I was hyperventilating. There was another event that we did at the Swedish American Hall, which is this big, beautiful venue in San Francisco, dream venue, but then during the show, the bartenders were loudly scooping ice in the back of the room the entire time, and nobody in the back of the theater could hear anything. Like this, who keep me going and who help me think critically and dream big and live with my heart open. So before I go, I just want to share with you some of the lessons that I've learned as I've done this. Does anybody know who this person is? Yes. So Brene Brown wrote this book called Daring Greatly, which I love. And somebody recommended it to me recently when I told them that sometimes when a new podcast episode goes out or something, I get this wave of anxiety where I feel suddenly really embarrassed and really shy, and I wish I could just undo everything that I've ever done or made and take it off the internet and delete my Twitter profile and just become anonymous and blend back into just stay in my apartment. And Renee's argument is that strength is vulnerability. And that in order to chase your dreams and to make something that you're passionate about, you do have to expose yourself. Expose yourself to criticism, expose yourself to the possibility of failure. Some might even say the certainty of failure, depending on how you define failure, small failures along the way. But to know that and to do it anyway is an incredible act of courage, and Brene argues an act of strength. And so that's a message that I keep close to my heart when I have those moments of anxiety. There's another book that I read called The War of Art, where the author says something along the lines of, it's better to be in the arena getting stomped on by the bull than it is to be in the stands, or worse, in the parking lot. And that's when I'm feeling bad. I just imagine the bull stomping on me again, and I'm I'm so glad to be here. There's just no safe way out of it, and so you have to dare greatly if you're going to create. The other thing I've noticed is if you build it and you love what you're doing and you're doing it well, people will notice and people will come to you. So, for example, that very first show that I showed you the picture of at the embassy with 40 people, this was our first show. We hadn't done any shows in the past. And I'm standing at the front of the room, tinkering with the recorder and getting ready, and this woman comes up to me and she's holding a tape recorder and she says, "Hi, my name is Anna and I work for NPR Snap Judgment. I heard about this cool thing you're doing. Do you mind if I sit in the audience and record?" And we had never done a show before. I hadn't even built anything yet. And this woman had showed up on my doorstep. And she has been one of my informal mentors moving forward, and it's thanks to her that one of our podcast episodes was years later, actually featured on her Snap Judgment. It's the same thing with Vidya. I was doing this work and I got this email from a medical student across the country who invited me for an interview for her website, and now 2 years later, I'm here standing here with you. So if you build something that is meaningful and making a difference, people will come to you, including people who may have rejected you from things you've applied for in the past, by the way. The next lesson I've learned is that you should tell people what you are doing. It used to be that over at San Francisco General, where I work, every week we get together and we have these division meetings, and my boss would say, does anyone have any announcements? And I would have a show coming up, or I would have a podcast episode coming up, and I wouldn't announce it. And I think I just didn't want to seem like arrogant. I also felt shy, and I felt like my work was weird, and that if I announced it, like it wouldn't be valued or something like that. But then I realized if I don't value myself, no one else is going to value me. And if I don't promote myself, no one else is going to promote me. So now we have those division meetings, and I raise my hand and I say, actually, we have this great show coming up, and I just, tell people what I'm doing in a way that's, excited and authentic and not like bragging. Other things you can do, email the university newsletter, tell them what you're doing. Send cold emails to local journalists who might want to cover what you're doing and get the word out. These are the ways for you to make yourself visible and to get support for the work you do and to get money for the work you do. And the money part is the hardest part, and it's the part that I'm facing right now, and it's not fun. Nobody teaches you how to ask for money in medical training. In fact, as a medical student, you spend most of your time hemorrhaging money, not asking for money. And I got to this place where I felt guilty asking for money, and then a fundraising mentor said to me, you have to think of money as an energy. When you're asking for money, you're not asking for money to go in your wallet so that you can pay your rent or buy a pair of shoes. You're asking for somebody who has resources to inject energy into a project that you're passionate about, which will ripple out and affect other people. And so that's something that I try to keep in mind as I'm trying to get support for my artistic work, which, as we all know in academic medicine, it's not easy to get support for projects that veer off the traditional grain. The other thing that I've learned is the importance of teamwork. So I think sometimes in medicine we have this mentality that you have to do everything yourself. For example, we were recording all of our live shows for a while, and someone said, you should make a podcast. And I said, oh great, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that myself. I'll buy microphones and I'll just make a podcast all by myself, no problem. And then I did some research and I realized, there's a reason this is someone's full-time job. And I had to find someone else to help me with that part of it. So don't be afraid to outsource. You don't have to have all the skill sets yourself. Identify what your skill sets are. Identify areas where you would like to grow, but there may be skill sets that you don't necessarily need to gain, and that you can partner with someone else who brings a different set of skills to the table, and you can work together to make magic. And another reason you want to do this is because you want to protect your project. So there's a doctor at UCSF named Anna Chang who gave me this amazing piece of advice. She's this fabulous medical educator who's got her hands in a million different pots, tons of projects going on. And she tells me, every day I get in my car and I drive to and from work on the highway. And I want to know that if one day, God forbid, if I get in an accident, that all my projects are not going to die with me. Because if they do, then I have failed my projects. So she really was hammering home this point that in order to make a project sustainable, you have to build a team around you. In case you need to step away later or God forbid something happens to you, your project can live on. And I just want to encourage people that it can be difficult to find mentors. Like I mentioned earlier, I have this radio journalism mentor, I have a fundraising mentor. It's hard to find these mentors in the confines of a hospital where most of the mentors are more traditional basic science and research mentors. So sometimes you have to go out and find them yourselves, and sometimes that means asking for connections, Googling people, sending cold emails to people you admire, and you'd be surprised how many people will actually respond back to you and are more than happy to donate 20 to 30 minutes of their time to have coffee with you and help you out. A tip on that, if you are going to email someone, especially if it's someone with limited time, it can be helpful to have a specific ask. So instead of just saying, can I pick your brain or something like that, maybe it's, can you read this essay and give me feedback? Can you look at my business plan and give me feedback? I noticed that you're connected to this other person. Is there any way you'd be kind enough to make an introduction to me by email with that person? And that actually takes the burden off the person that you're reaching out to so that they know concretely how they can help you. And then just coming back to this slide here about being joyful, creativity can feel like an uphill battle because it is. But when you're building a thing, it's easy to become stressed and overwhelmed and doubt yourself and feel terrified or feel like a failure. Or maybe things are going really well, but that's also anxiety producing because now you're having to strategize about what direction to take things in and where and how to get money and who to partner with and things like that. And this can all crowd your mind. So my best piece of blanket advice is to just not forget the reason that you started to build the thing that you're building. And constantly remember to return back to your mission and to your passion and to your values. And just don't forget to bask in the joy of your amazing creation, each of which is its own miracle. So I'm going to follow my own advice and tell you about what I'm doing. It's a live show and podcast called The Nocturnists. Please subscribe. And then I'll just leave you with this quote from Dorothy Parker. Creativity is a wild mind and a disciplined eye. And what I love about this is sometimes I think when people imagine creativity, they focus on the wild mind part. And that's a super important part, and that's the fun part and the genius part. But it also requires a lot of discipline. I recently went to a writing fellowship in the woods of New Hampshire, and I met a writer there. And I was joking with her about how this was really the first time I had ever been surrounded by a community of artists. And she was joking that I must be surprised at how many hours they really spend with their butt in the chair toiling over the manuscripts in these cabins. Creativity and art is very fun, but it's hard work. But I know you all can do it. And I hope that my story and my lessons were of help to you as you move forward to build your thing. So